I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you are overseeing a multi-billion-dollar construction project, like a massive 80-story skyscraper right in the middle of a bustling downtown.
Or, maybe a suspension bridge spanning a notoriously rough channel of water.
Right, exactly. The stakes in those situations are almost impossibly high. I mean, you have thousands of workers swarming the site, mountains of raw materials arriving by the hour, heavy machinery everywhere.
Yeah, and a budget that burns through hundreds of thousands of dollars every single day.
So in an environment like that, the default state of reality is just entropy. It actively wants to fall apart. One miscommunicated order or one offhand comment taken as a directive could lead to absolute financial ruin.
Or catastrophic safety hazards, which is even worse.
Yeah, totally. So how do the people in charge prevent this incredibly complex organism from dissolving into total chaos?
Well, the answer isn't just hiring smart people, or having endless meetings. It really relies on having an absolutely rigid, ironclad system for how decisions are made, and how they are communicated, and crucially, how they are recorded. You are constantly fighting against the degradation of information out there.
Because when a project reaches a certain scale, verbal agreements and casual emails become massive liabilities.
Exactly. You need a mechanism that forces everyone to just stop, verify authority, and document the directive before a single piece of earth is actually moved.
Okay, let's unpack this because that brings us to the mission for today's deep dive. We are looking at a very specific, incredibly powerful tool used in these mega projects.
It comes from the FIDIC Red Book 2017, right?
Yes, exactly. For those who aren't living and breathing construction law every day, FIDIC is essentially the gold standard framework for international construction contracts.
It's the Bible for these huge projects.
It really is. And the specific document we are examining today is the instruction checklist, specifically for subclause 3.5, which deals with the engineer's instructions, and subclause 1.9, which covers delayed drawings or instructions.
What's fascinating here is that when you look at the sheer volume of a FIDI contract, you are dealing with hundreds of pages of dense legal obligations.
It's a lot to take in.
Oh, it's overwhelming. But the checklist method does something remarkable with that density. It distills highly complex, legally binding procedures down into simple boxes.
Like yes, no, or not applicable.
Exactly, yeah. It ensures that critical, mathematically precise steps are not missed in the heat of the moment. Because when a crane is waiting to lift a steel beam and the weather is turning, nobody has time for that.
Right, they can't just flip through a 300-page legal binder to figure out who has the authority to tell the crane operator what to do.
Nobody's doing that. The checklist becomes the actual operational reality of the contract on the ground.
When I first heard the term checklist, I immediately thought of, a grocery list. Eggs, milk, bread. It sounds mundane.
It sounds like boring bureaucracy.
Yeah, almost like the most boring piece of paperwork imaginable.
Oh.
But reading through the source material, it becomes clear that this is actually a high-stakes roadmap.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a tool for navigating authority, managing massive sums of money, and controlling critical timelines. And whether you are in construction, software development, healthcare, or whatever, understanding this is huge.
It really is a masterclass in project survival. The checklist methodology takes abstract legal theory and forces it into a binary physical reality.
Leaving no room for, I thought you meant, or I assumed they had the authority.
Exactly. It eliminates assumptions entirely.
So let's start with that concept of authority, because before we can even get into arguing about whether an instruction is good or bad, expensive or cheap, we have to know if it actually is an official instruction.
Right, which is harder than it sounds on a site with thousands of people.
Yeah, so how does the FIDIC framework handle the sheer number of people on a site who might try to give an order?
Well, Section A of the checklist deals with general principles, and it immediately targets the who. It explicitly verifies if the instruction was given by the engineer or the engineer's representative.
Or a very specifically delegated assistant, right, under subclause 3.4.
Yes, exactly. It states that the contractor must only take instructions from those specific people. Not the financial backer who is funding the project, not a random consulting architect who wandered onto the site.
There's certainly not someone just claiming to act on the employer's behalf.
Right. It locks down the chain of command.
I look at this like a military chain of command, or honestly, playing a really high-stakes game of Simon Says.
Simon Says, I like that.
Yeah, if Simon, meaning the designated engineer, didn't say it, the contractor shouldn't move a single muscle.
They really shouldn't.
Because on a large project, The employer, the person actually paying for the whole thing, might show up on site, look at a freshly poured concrete wall, and decide they want it moved 3 feet to the left.
Which happens all the time, by the way.
Right. And if the contractor listens to the employer directly and moves that wall, they are in breach of the procedure.
They are. And they can do all that heavy, expensive work and then find out they aren't getting paid for it. Yeah. The employer, despite holding the purse strings, does not have the contractual authority to issue that instruction directly to the workers. It has to go through the engineer.
Which protects the integrity of the design and the budget. But I want to push back on the mechanics of this, though.
Okay, go for it.
Looking at Section H of the checklist, there is a standalone question that asks, is the correct instruction form used, completed, and signed?
Yes, the official form.
But in 2026, when we have instant messaging, project management software, and email on our phones, requiring a specific physical instruction form feels, I don't know, like unnecessary bureaucracy.
I get why you'd say that.
If the engineer is standing right there, or if they shoot over a quick email saying, hey, move the wall, wouldn't that suffice? Why the rigid adherence to this formal piece of paper?
Well, the instruction form is the physical anchor of accountability. An email can be dashed off in 5 seconds from a smartphone while the engineer is distracted, maybe getting into a taxi. It can be vague. It can be easily misinterpreted. The formal instruction form and the checklist that verifies its use ensures that this process isn't bypassed for the sake of convenience.
It requires deliberate thought, then.
Exactly. When you force someone to fill out the official form, sign it, and have the contractor check the box confirming the correct form was used, you eliminate ambiguity.
Everyone on site knows an official, legally binding directive has just been issued.
Yeah. It introduces friction into the communication process, but it's deliberate, productive friction.
To prevent rogue directives from slipping into the workflow unnoticed.
Exactly. And the checklist also introduces a fascinating ticking clock mechanism regarding those delegated assistants we talked about.
Oh, right, the assistants. How does that work?
Let's say a delegated assistant, someone the engineer has given limited authority to, issues an instruction using the proper form. The contractor receives it, but looking at the scope of the order, they question it.
Like, they wonder if this assistant actually has the authority to mandate this specific change.
Yes. The checklist notes that the contractor can formally question it by sending a notice to the engineer.
And this is where the clock starts. Right.
The moment that notice is sent, a 7-day timer begins. If the main engineer receives that notice and stays completely silent for 7 days, meaning they don't reverse the assistant's instruction and they don't vary it, that silence legally means the assistant's instruction is deemed confirmed.
Wow. That is a surprisingly elegant failsafe. It completely flips the burden of action.
It really does.
The engineer can't just ignore the email, go on vacation, and say later, oh, I never approved what my assistant told you to do. By doing nothing, they assume full responsibility.
Because the site cannot afford to be paralyzed while waiting for an executive to check their inbox. 7 days, and the contractor has their answer.
Allowing them to proceed with the work knowing the contractual authority is secure. So we've established the Simon Says protocol.
We know Simon gave the order.
And Simon used the correct physical instruction form, but what happens when the authorized person gives a terrible order?
Ah, yeah. That's the real test.
Because a contractor might look at the properly formatted instruction and realize it involves a massive amount of extra work that isn't in the budget. Or, much worse, they realize the instruction creates a severe safety hazard.
Right.
How does a contractor push back against the person signing their checks without getting fired?
The checklist provides a rigid, emotionless structure for that exact disagreement. Telling the person in charge that they are wrong or asking them for more money is inherently fraught with politics and ego.
Oh, yeah. Nobody likes being told they're wrong.
It causes arguments and delays. But the checklist methodology handles this by funneling the pushback through specific, standardized channels.
Let's break down how it handles variations, which are essentially, changes to the original scope of work.
Okay. Sections C and D of the checklist cover this territory.
Right. If the instruction comes down, it explicitly states on the form that it is a variation. Then subclause 13.3.1 comes into play. Everyone acknowledges the scope has changed.
And the adjustments to time and money will be negotiated formally. But the real friction happens when the engineer issues an instruction and doesn't call it a variation.
They treat it like normal in scope work.
Yeah, but the contractor looks at the blueprint and knows it's definitely an extra cost.
So what happens then?
Under the checklist methodology, the contractor must give a notice to the engineer immediately. And this is the critical part. They must do it before commencing any related work.
Before they start digging.
Exactly. They have to formally set out their reasons for why they believe this constitutes a variation. They cannot perform the extra labor, buy the extra materials, and then hand the engineer a surprise bill 3 months later.
Which makes complete logical sense. You can't eat an entire steak at a restaurant and then tell the waiter it was cooked wrong in order to get a discount.
That's a great analogy.
You have to send it back to the kitchen before you take a bite, so the chef has the opportunity to fix it or confirm that you are willing to pay for a new one.
And this rule of immediate notice before work begins applies to even more severe scenarios under subclause 3.5.
Like what kind of scenarios?
Well, if the contractor evaluates the instruction and considers that it does not comply with applicable laws, or if they determine it will reduce the safety of the works.
Or even if it's just technically impossible to execute from an engineering standpoint, right?
Yes. In any of those cases, they must hit the pause button. They issue that notice immediately, halting the problematic work before it starts.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at how the engineer is forced to respond to this pushback.
The 7-day window.
Yeah, according to Section E of the checklist, the engineer has 7 days after receiving the contractor's notice to respond. They can confirm the instruction, telling the contractor to proceed anyway.
They can reverse it entirely.
Or they can vary it to fix the issue. But if the engineer fails to respond within that 7-day period, if they go completely radio silent this time, the instruction is deemed to have been revoked.
The contrast there is so vital to understand.
It's a brilliantly designed system. Earlier, when we talked about the contractor questioning an assistance authority, silence from the main engineer meant the order was confirmed, the project moves forward.
Right.
But here, if the contractor raises a red flag about safety, legality, or hidden extra costs, silence from the engineer means the order is automatically revoked. It defaults to safety and cost protection.
The psychological brilliance of using a checklist to manage this cannot be overstated. In a standard corporate environment, a contractor might agonize over how to push back on a powerful engineer.
They draft and redraft a delicate diplomatic email.
Constantly worrying about ruining the working relationship or seeming different. Yeah, but the checklist removes the friction of confrontation.
The contractor doesn't have to craft a political message.
Exactly. They simply follow the contractor's notice checklist items.
Mm-hmm.
They just tick the box that says, notice given because instruction reduces safety.
It depersonalizes the conflict completely. It's not a personal attack on the engineer's competence or their design.
All right, the contractor's just checking a box on the official form.
It shifts the dynamic from, I think you are wrong, to, the protocol requires me to flag this.
It forces critical thinking and immediate action before any potentially unsafe or unfunded work begins. And that ticking clock ensures that the engineer cannot hide from making a difficult decision.
Because if they ignore a safety concern for a week because they don't want to deal with it, the dangerous work is automatically canceled with the contract itself.
Exactly. It protects the workers, the budget, and the project timeline from human avoidance behaviors.
It really highlights how much of project management is actually just managing human ego and human error.
It's mostly that, to be honest.
So we've looked at what happens when an instruction is given, and we've explored the protocol for pushing back on a bad instruction. Let's flip the scenario entirely.
Okay, the flip side.
What happens when you are standing around a massive site paying hundreds of specialized workers by the hour, and you desperately need an instruction or a crucial blueprint from the engineer to move forward, and the engineer is nowhere to be found?
Yes. The delays. The checklist also tracks the mechanics of delay. Sections F and G of the checklist bring in subclause 1.9, which governs delayed drawings or instructions.
Because an engineer's failure to act, like their absence or indecision, can be just as financially devastating to a contractor as an engineer giving a terrible instruction.
Absolutely. The rule here requires the contractor to give notice to the engineer whenever the works are likely to be delayed or disrupted because a necessary drawing isn't issued in a reasonable time.
But the checklist doesn't allow for vague complaining, does it?
No, not at all. A contractor can't just send a text message saying, hey, you guys are holding us up. The method forces incredible specificity.
The contractor has to detail exactly what drawing or instruction is needed and why it is necessary for the next phase of work.
They have to state by when it absolutely must be issued and the exact nature and mathematical amount of delay they will suffer if they don't get it by that deadline.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this transforms a generalized frustration into a highly specific, legally binding claim.
Yes, you are putting the engineer on formal notice that their administrative delay is going to have quantifiable contractual consequences on the ground.
Think about the logistics of cooking a massive, multi-course feast for a huge event.
Okay, back to the kitchen.
Yeah. You are the head chef,
Mm.
and you are waiting on the supplier to deliver a crucial ingredient. Let's say saffron for the main dish. You can't just stand around for 3 hours, let the entire dinner service fall apart, and then later blame the delivery driver for the disaster.
Right, because by then the dinner's ruined.
Exactly. To
Well,
get a refund or to justify the delay to your clients, you have to document exactly what ingredients is missing, why you cannot proceed with the cooking without it, the absolute drop-dead time you need it by.
and how many plates will be ruined if it doesn't cross the threshold in the next 10 minutes?
Yes. The mechanism requires you to establish causality and impact before the damage is fully realized.
And if the contractor properly documents this, according to the checklist, and the engineer still fails to deliver the necessary instruction in time, the contractor is entitled to relief.
Which is subject to subclause 20.2, right?
Right, which governs claims for payment and extensions. They can get an extension of time.
Meaning they won't be hit with massive financial penalties for missing the final project deadline because the delay wasn't their fault.
Exactly. But furthermore, they can also be entitled to payment of cost plus profit for the time they were forced to sit idle.
The mechanics of cost plus profit are fascinating to me. It means the employer isn't just reimbursing the contractor for the wages of the workers who are standing around doing nothing.
No, they are actually paying the contractor's profit margin on top of those costs.
Why is the penalty structured that way?
It comes down to opportunity cost. While that contractor's crews and heavy machinery are sitting idle waiting for a drawing, they are unable to bid on or work on other profitable jobs.
Ah, right. The contractor is operating a business.
Exactly, and the engineer's delay is actively preventing them from generating revenue elsewhere. The cost plus profit mechanism ensures the contractor is kept whole, not just reimbursed for out-of-pocket losses,
Which is a heavy financial penalty for the employer.
which heavily incentivizes the engineer to provide instructions on time.
But there is a vital catch built into Section G of the checklist, isn't there? A self-reflection requirement.
Yes. Item G2 demands verification that the delay wasn't actually caused by the contractor's own errors.
Like checking their own work.
Right. It requires a formal check to see if the engineer's failure to issue the drawing on time was actually a downstream result of the contractor submitting their own preliminary documents late.
Or making a fundamental error in their earlier submissions that the engineer had to waste time fixing.
Exactly. If the engineer couldn't approve the final blueprint because the contractor gave them the wrong soil measurements a month ago, the contractor cannot claim an extension of time.
And they certainly can't demand cost plus profit for the resulting delay.
The checklist forces accountability in both directions. Before the contractor can formally demand extra time and money from the employer, they have to run through this specific section on the checklist and verify that their own house is in order.
They have to confirm that the delay rests entirely on the engineer's shoulders.
It acts as a filter, basically, preventing frivolous claims from clogging up the project management pipeline.
So what does this all mean? When we zoom out and look at this entire FIDI 2017 checklist for subclause 3.5 and 1.9, we see that it is so much more than just a piece of administrative paperwork.
It's the vital circulatory system of a massive construction project.
It really is. It tracks the complete life cycle of a single instruction. It begins by ensuring you have the correct instruction form and proper authority to speak.
Then it provides a safe, highly standardized, and emotionless way to push back on scope creep, legal issues, or safety hazards.
Utilizing that brilliantly designed 7-day revocation failsafe. And finally, it provides a rigorous, mathematically specific method for claiming time and money when the engineer themselves becomes the bottleneck, complete with a self-reflection check to ensure fairness.
And the entire process culminates in Section 1, which is the formal sign-off. Both the engineer's representative and the contractor physically sign and date the checklist.
Bringing it all together.
It solidifies the paper trail, meaning there is no more debating what was said in a noisy site trailer. There is only what is documented, verified, and signed on the official form.
It bridges the gap between theoretical legal contracts and the messy, muddy reality of a live construction site. Now, as we wrap up, we should remind you, the listener, that the document itself has a prominent note explicitly stating that it is a practical aid.
Very important point.
It summarizes the complex procedural requirements of the contract to help people on the ground, but it absolutely does not replace the full binding text of the contract.
And it is certainly not a substitute for formal legal advice. You cannot just waive a completed checklist in an arbitration hearing and ignore the actual contract clauses.
But as a daily operational tool to keep a multi-billion-dollar project moving forward safely, it is indispensable.
It takes something incredibly dense and complex and translates it into immediate, actionable steps. By standardizing conflict resolution and accountability into a simple grid of yes, no, or not applicable, we systematically strip away the human variables of ego, pride, and memory.
And looking at how effective this rigid analog system of forms and checkboxes is at managing human behavior, it leaves me with a final thought to consider. We are moving into an era of artificial intelligence and smart contracts.
Oh, that's a fascinating angle.
As these technologies mature, you have to wonder if this physical checklist method will eventually be replaced entirely by code. Imagine a construction site where the instruction form is a digital smart contract, and the 7-day ticking clock is managed by an AI.
An AI that automatically authorizes or revokes work orders the second the countdown hits 0.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Completely removing human latency from the equation. Will technology make the checklist obsolete, or will we always need the deliberate friction of a physical form to force us to stop and think before we build?
That's the big question.
Something to keep in mind the next time you find yourself navigating the chaos of a complex project. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Download the free PDF checklist from our website. See the link in the description. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and see you next time.